there are battles that were not simple confrontations. They were clashes that changed the course of history, feats that gave birth to immortal heroes, and feats that continue to inspire to this day. Today, in this count, you will relive the 10 most epic battles in all of history. History of the Immortals. Where history roars with steel and legend, subscribe and be part of the legacy that never dies. In this count, we don't just consider who won or lost. We look at the historical impact, symbolism, and heroic deeds that made these battles true legends. Because history is not written only with victories. It is written with deeds that time can never erase. Position number 10, Battle of Actium. In the year 31 BC, the fate of Rome was decided in the waters of the Gulf of Actium. Off the coast of present-day Greece, two titanic forces clashed: the fleet of Octavian, the future Augustus, and the combined forces of Mark Antony and Cleopatra. It was not just a naval battle. It was a clash of ambitions, personal destinies, and entire empires. Ships lined up like metallic giants at sea, as men fought not only with swords and catapults, but also with the desperation and pride of knowing that history was watching them. Mark Antony, Cleopatra's lover and ally, depended on the strength of the Egyptian queen and the magnificence of her fleet, but Octavian showed a strategic precision and military coolness that would mark his genius. When the tide turned and Antony's forces began to fall into disarray, the Roman fleet closed in on the siege, and fate was sealed. Octavian's victory not only meant the downfall of his rivals, it was the birth of the Roman Empire, the end of the Republic, and the beginning of a new era of absolute power. Actium became legend, an example of how cunning, strategy, and determination can decide not just a confrontation, but the course of civilization. Every sunken ship and every fallen man was immortalized in history, reminding us that glory is often forged in the midst of utter chaos. Position number 9, Battle of the Teutoburg Forest. In 9 AD, the heart of the Roman Empire suffered one of the most devastating blows in its entire history in the dense forests of Teutoburg, in modern-day Germany. 3 Roman legions, confident of their superiority, marched under the command of Publius Quintilius Varus, with the intention of consolidating Roman rule beyond the Rhine. But the Germans, led by the cunning and brave Arminius, an ally turned traitor, had prepared a perfect ambush. For days the legions advanced without suspecting that each step brought them closer to the death trap. As the Romans entered the narrow valleys and swamps of the forest, arrows began to rain, ambushes followed, and chaos gripped the disciplined formation of the army. Arminius's tactics, taking advantage of the terrain and surprise, destroyed the most fearsome war machine of antiquity. Within hours, 3 legions, thousands of trained and equipped soldiers, were annihilated or captured. Teutoburg was not just a military defeat. It was a psychological blow that marked the natural limit of the Roman Empire in Germany, and made it clear that neither gold nor discipline could always overcome cunning and knowledge of the terrain. The Teutoburg ambush became a legend, an eternal example of how strategy, patience, and treachery can change the course of history. Since then, the memory of the German heroes and the humiliation of Rome have been forever etched in the annals of civilization, reminding us that even the most powerful can fall when they underestimate their enemies. Position number 8, Battle of Alesia. In 52 BC, the history of Gaul reached its most decisive moment on the imposing hill of Alesia. There, Julius Caesar, commander of Rome, faced the formidable Vercingetorix, leader of the Gallic resistance, whose cunning and charisma had united tribes that until then had been rivals with each other. Gaul was in flames, and the fate of millions hung on a battle that seemed unwinnable for either side. Vercingetorix, confident in his numerical superiority and the fierce defense of his fortress, hoped to hold out until hunger and despair broke the Romans. But Caesar, master of strategy, built a double system of fortifications that completely surrounded Alesia, an outer ring to protect against Gallic reinforcements, and an inner ring to contain the besieged. For weeks, both armies fought not only with swords and spears, but with ingenuity, ingenious traps, and superhuman courage. When Gallic reinforcements arrived outside, they attempted to break through the encirclement, only to be met with the precision, discipline, and brutal efficiency of the Roman army. Eventually, hunger, desperation, and tactical superiority forced Vercingetorix to surrender, surrendering his sword and his life to history. Alesia was not only a military victory, it was a triumph that secured Roman control over all of Gaul, cemented Caesar's fame, and demonstrated how strategy and patience could overcome even the fiercest resistance. The legend of Vercingetorix and the mastery of Caesar were immortalized, reminding us that war is not only strength, but intelligence, audacity, and the ability to turn adversity into glory. Position number 7, Battle of Plataea. In 479 BC, after years of Persian invasions that had shaken the Greek land, the Battle of Plataea was fought, a confrontation that would define the fate of Western civilization. After defeating Xerxes at Salamis and stopping the Persians in other previous battles, the Greek armies, united under the leadership of Pausanias and the Spartan and Athenian generals, were preparing for the final clash against the forces of Mardonius, a Persian commander who still hoped to subdue the rebel polis. The plain of Plataea became the scene of a monumental battle. Hundreds of Spartan hoplites, with their shields and spears lined up in perfect formation, withstood the onslaught of a much larger Persian army, while the Athenians, flanking with precision, attacked from the sides. The combat was brutal, protracted, and full of tension, where each man fought not only for his life, but for the freedom of his polis and all of Greece. The coordination, discipline, and bravery of the Greeks prevailed, and Mardonius fell in combat, marking the definitive defeat of the Persian army on Greek soil. Plataea was not just a tactical victory. It symbolized the resistance of democracy and autonomy in the face of Eastern despotism, consolidating the spirit that defined Hellenic identity for centuries. The battle was etched in history as an example of unity, strategy, and collective heroism. A moment when civilization itself seemed to stand on the shoulders of the brave who dared to challenge a seemingly invincible empire. Every spear raised and every shield clashed echoed beyond the battlefield, transforming Plataea into a legend and reminding us that freedom, when fought for with courage and strategy, can triumph even in the face of the most overwhelming adversity. Position number 6, Battle of Hydaspes. In 326 BC, Alexander the Great, the conqueror who had already overthrown millennia-old empires, confronted King Poros on the banks of the Hydaspes River in Pakistan. This would not be just any battle. It was a clash of cultures, of different worlds, and above all, a confrontation full of audacity, strategy, and brute force. Poros's army had brave warriors and, above all, huge war elephants, trained animals that became real machines of destruction on the battlefield. Alexander, known for his wit and calm under pressure, had to overcome an obstacle that seemed impossible, crossing a river in the middle of the rainy season and facing an enemy who took advantage of every advantage of the terrain. With a mixture of discipline, coordination, and superior tactics, the Macedonians attacked in close formations, avoiding the deadliest impact of elephants and gradually weakening enemy lines. The battle lasted for hours of fury and calculated strategy, where every move, every order, could mean life or death. Eventually, Alexander managed to defeat Porus, who, admiring the young conqueror's audacity and chivalry, received pardon and kept his kingdom under the protection of Macedon. Hydaspes not only secured Alexander's supremacy in India, but became an eternal symbol of how intelligence, courage, and innovation can overcome even seemingly insurmountable forces. The epic of the elephants, the courage of the men, and the brilliance of Alexander were immortalized, reminding us that in history, glory is forged not only with strength, but with the vision and audacity of those who dare to challenge the impossible. Position number 5, Battle of Zama. In 202 BC, the fate of Rome and Carthage was decided on the plain of Zama, in what is now Tunisia. After years of war, the Second Punic War had seen Hannibal spread terror across Italy, crossing the Alps with elephants and defeating Roman legions one after another. But Rome was not willing to succumb, and the young Scipio Africanus, a brilliant strategist and daring tactician, decided to take the war to the heart of Africa to directly confront the Carthaginian master. In Zama, two military geniuses met in a titanic duel. Hannibal relied on his veterans and his war elephants, veritable machines of terror on the battlefield, while Scipio, with a younger but disciplined army, used ingenious maneuvers and perfect organization to neutralize the elephant's advantage and unbalance the enemy formations. The battle took place between charges, trumpets, and infantry and cavalry maneuvers, a clash where each decision could tip the balance of history. Eventually, the combination of strategy, discipline, and coordination allowed Scipio to win, defeating Hannibal and securing Roman dominance over the Western Mediterranean. Zama was not just a military triumph. It was the moment that cemented Rome as a superpower, demonstrated Scipio's genius, and marked the end of Carthaginian ambitions to dominate the West. The battle was immortalized as an eternal example of how intelligence, courage, and discipline can overcome even the most formidable adversary, and how a single confrontation can forever change the fate of entire nations. Zama became legend, a reminder that in war, glory belongs to those who not only fight, but think, innovate, and challenge the impossible. Position number 4, Battle of Cannae. In the year 216 BC, during the Second Punic War, Hannibal Barca, the Carthaginian military genius who had crossed the Alps with elephants and sown terror in Italy, confronted Rome on the plain of Cannae. In front of him, the Roman army, proud, disciplined, and numerous, trusted in his strength and in the superiority of his legions. But Hannibal had a plan that would go down in history as the most famous enveloping maneuver of all time. Willing to turn his numerical disadvantage into victory, he organized his troops into an ingenious semicircle, drawing the Romans toward the center, where the Carthaginian lines fell back strategically. As the Romans advanced, confident of crushing the enemy, they found themselves increasingly encircled. Carthaginian infantry and cavalry surrounded the colossal Roman army on all sides, and the trap closed like a relentless monster. Within hours, tens of thousands of Roman soldiers fell, as Hannibal demonstrated once again that strategy and audacity could overcome brute force. Cannae was not only a crushing military victory, it was a symbol of tactical genius, a lesson in how intelligence and planning can change the course of history. The Roman humiliation was profound, and the echo of defeat reverberated for centuries, making Hannibal a legend and recording the Battle of Cannae as an eternal example of strategic mastery. Every decision, every troop movement, and every calculated attack was immortalized, reminding us that in war, greatness lies not only in numbers, but in the minds and audacity of those who dare to challenge the impossible. Position number 3, Battle of Gaugamela. On the arid plains of Gaugamela, Alexander the Great faced the fate and colossal might of the Persian Empire. Darius III assembled an army that some ancient chroniclers put at more than 200,000 men, reinforced with war chariots equipped with blades and elephants brought from India. Against him, Alexander had only about 47,000 soldiers, Macedonians and allies hardened by years of campaigning. The numerical difference seemed insurmountable, but in Gaugamela, not only two armies faced each other. Audacity against tradition, genius against the inertia of a fatigued empire. Alexander deployed his phalanxes with surgical precision, advancing his elite cavalry, the companions, to the right flank. It was a carefully laid trap, By provoking the Persians to extend their lines, Alexander opened a gap in the enemy's center. When Darius ordered their chariots to be launched, the Macedonians diverted them with nimble runners who cleared the way with impeccable discipline. Then, in a lightning move, Alexander led the decisive charge, launching himself straight into the Persian heartland. The sight of the young king advancing with spear in hand and the cavalry sweeping in close formation sowed terror in Darius's ranks. The great king, unable to contain the chaos, fled the field in his chariot, leaving behind a crumbling empire. The clash was so devastating that Gaugamela not only meant a victory, it was the act that sealed the fate of Persia and opened the gates of Babylon, Susa, and Persepolis to Alexander. The echo of Gaugamela still resonates as an example of absolute tactical genius, turning numerical inferiority into strategic advantage, using terrain and deception as weapons, and leading from the front line with almost superhuman audacity. There, in that dawn of glory, Alexander ceased to be a conquering king to become an immortal legend. Position number 2, Battle of Marathon. The plain of Marathon was the scene where a small citizen army challenged the greatest empire of its time. In 490 BC, Darius Tavarn's Persians arrived with more than 25,000 soldiers, archers, and horsemen, convinced that Greece would fall in a matter of days. In front of them, barely 10,000 Athenian hoplites, reinforced by 1,000 brave Plataeans, knew that they could not retreat. If Athens fell, Greek freedom would disappear under the Eastern yoke. General Miltiades made a bold and brilliant decision. Instead of waiting for the attack, he ordered a frontal charge of more than 1,500 meters, a suicidal act for any army of the time. The hoplites ran with the weight of their spears and shields, enduring the rain of Persian arrows, until they collided like an iron wall against the enemy infantry. The key to the strategy was to reinforce the wings and weaken the center. When the Persians broke through the Greek front, they were surrounded and crushed on both flanks. The result was astonishing. More than 6,000 Persians were left lying on the field, while the Greeks lost only 192 men, whose names were engraved in stone for eternity. The victory at Marathon not only saved Athens, but proved to the world that discipline, strategy, and civic courage could defeat a seemingly invincible empire. From this battle is also born the legend of the soldier Hydaspes, who, after fighting, ran to Athens to announce victory before falling exhausted, giving rise to the famous modern race, the Marathon. Marathon was not simply a battle, it was the beginning of Greek myth, the moment when Western freedom was held on the shoulders of a few who refused to surrender. On that plain, Athens wrote with blood and steel the first great warning to Persia. The Greeks would never be easy to subdue. Position number 1, Battle of Thermopylae. In the narrow gorge of Thermopylae, where the mountains plunge into the sea, and there is hardly room for two chariots to pass together, one of the most legendary pages of military history was written. There, in 480 BC, King Leonidas of Sparta and his 300 hoplites, accompanied by a few thousand Greek allies, faced the colossal army of the Persian king Xerxes I, which the chronicles describe as a human sea of more than 250,000 soldiers. The battle was not just a clash of spears and shields, but an eternal symbol of endurance and sacrifice. Leonidas, knowing that defeat was inevitable, chose to stay and fight to the end, becoming the supreme example of Spartan duty, to live with honor and die with glory. For 3 days, the Greeks used the narrowness of the pass to neutralize the Persian numerical superiority, stopping wave after wave of enemies, even the dreaded immortals, Xerxes' elite. The denouement came when a local traitor, Ephialtes, revealed to the Persians a hidden path through the mountains, allowing them to surround the defenders. Leonidas dismissed most of the allies and kept his 300 Spartans, 700 Thespians, and 400 Thebans, who decided to share in the glory of sacrifice. Surrounded, they fought until their last breath, becoming martyrs of Greek freedom. Although militarily it was a defeat, Thermopylae became a founding myth of the West. His heroism gave the Greek polis time to reorganize, and a year later, at Plataea and Salamis, the Persians were defeated. The epitaph engraved on the tomb of the fallen sums up its greatness. Traveler, go and tell Sparta that here we lie, obedient to its laws. A simple phrase that encapsulates the essence of battle: honor, duty, and eternal sacrifice. Thermopylae was not only a battle, it was a message to the world that a handful of men willing to die for their land can challenge an empire. Thus concludes our journey through the most legendary battlefields of antiquity. Stories of blood and steel, of men who faced darkness with the only certainty that glory would be eternal. These battles were not simple wars. They were the crucible where heroes were forged, where myths were born that still shake our memory today. And now the question is for you. Which battle do you think most profoundly marked the fate of history? Which one deserves to be remembered as the most immortal of all? Leave me your answer in the comments. We want to read you. If this journey through the roar of history made you vibrate, don't forget to like it, share this video with other lovers of legends, and above all, subscribe so that you don't miss the next battles that we will bring to life. Because here, we don't just tell history. Here we keep the flame of the eternal burning. Welcome to History of the Immortals, where history roars with steel and legend.